We see that Russia, well, recently now just launched its largest drone strikes on Ukraine with over 800 drones, also complemented with missiles, and the pressure is now intensifying across the entire front line. Now, given that the Trump is having this diplomatic efforts to end the war, he's saying again that he's disappointed and he will therefore support new sanctions. So we also see rhetoric from the political media establishment across NATO that this is evidence that Russia does not want peace. What do you make of this development?
Well, again, it's very important for people to understand what exactly this conflict is in the first place. The Trump administration itself has admitted and has blamed the previous Biden administration for starting the war, and they've characterized it as a U.S. proxy war against Russia. So it really is not up to Russia to end a war that is being waged against them by the United States, according to the Trump administration itself. It is up to the Trump administration to look at how this proxy war began, how it is being fought, and what measures need to be taken to stop it. For example, there is a U.S. military command in Germany right now overseeing the entire conflict in Ukraine. They are at the very top of the chain of command of Ukraine's armed forces, not Ukrainian generals, American generals. If President Trump put an end to that, brought these generals back home, or put them in charge of something that actually had to do with American national security, the war would end. It would end very quickly. Another factor fueling this war is the United States and its directive to the Europeans to continue funding and arming and training the Ukrainians. And also, and again, as the Western media itself has admitted, the United States Central Intelligence Agency is running Ukraine's intelligence networks inside Ukraine right now. That is another aspect of this war that if President Trump decided, he could end overnight and the conflict would end. So he's not serious about ending this conflict. And if people look back at his rhetoric, even before the elections, he was more or less telling people that he had no intention of ending it. He told people what they wanted to hear. But if you looked at the so-called peace plans that were being proposed, he was talking about freezing the conflict, which is the overarching agenda of the United States. If you want to call it a deep state, this is what was already underway during the Biden administration. They were losing the proxy war. The prospect of Ukrainian lines collapsing were increasing. And so they wanted to freeze it. They do not want to end it. This is about pulling Russia in, tying them down, while the United States pivots to China, Iran, and elsewhere, and then circle back around to Russia later. This is referred to as strategic sequencing, and this is what policymakers involved in the current Trump administration have laid out extensively in policy papers spanning many years.
I was wondering, can you explain this concept of strategic sequencing in terms of the U.S. Well, in this case, study the U.S. Proxy war against Russia?
Yeah, so the U.S. establishment, whether it's headed nominally by Democrats or Republicans, seeks primacy over the entire globe. All of these policy papers connected to either administration, all they talk about is maintaining America's dominance over the entire planet. It is to remain the largest sole superpower of the globe. And in order to do this, the United States needs to prevent all peer and near peer competitors from rising up and challenging its position globally. This is not about American national security. This is about America being able to do as it pleases worldwide, as it has for nearly a century now. And so strategic sequencing is a realization that the United States is incapable, does not have the resources to fight nations like Russia, China, Iran, and all of their allies around the globe all at the same time. They need to tie one down and then focus its resources on another. There's also this concept of division of labor, which was publicly stated by U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth back in February. The need for nations the U.S. essentially influences and for all intents and purposes controls, have them direct public resources to American foreign policy objectives. For Europe, for example, that would be taking public resources and channeling it into this proxy war against Russia in Ukraine. For Japan or South Korea or now the Philippines, completely politically captured by the U.S. That is directing public resources that would be used for the people in these countries to building up their military and encroaching upon and encircling and containing China in the Asia Pacific region. And so strategic sequencing right now, as it stands, the U.S. is prioritizing China as the greatest threat to its hegemony, not to America where it exists on a map, but to its hegemony over the planet. And so they need to pause the conflict in Ukraine against Russia and pivot towards China. So this is strategic sequencing. Deal with China first and then circle back around to Russia later. But they cannot allow Russia the freedom to rebuild its military, to redirect its resources in support of its allies, which includes China. That's why they need to freeze the conflict in Ukraine, not end it.
Yeah, people I just have a hard time imagining that yeah, the United States, I assume that they want the war to come at least to a temporary halt, given that they have other priorities. But this control that not just the United States, but the political West has established over Ukrainian intelligence services, and also having now large control over hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian soldiers, which they can use to fight a strategic rival. I mean, it's hard to imagine that they simply want to give this all up because humanitarian concerns or yeah, just a desire to get along better with Russia. So it does look like the main well, the best possible outcome for them would be to dial down the war a bit as to prevent Ukraine from collapsing, but also giving the United States some time to address its other priorities around the world. I think around the whole rhetoric of helping Ukraine, one forgets that this covers up the massive investments that have been done in building this. I mean, as you remember as well, back in 2014, on the first day after the coup, the United States already began to set up this partnership with Ukraine. From 2015 and all, you had the Washington Post reporting that the U.S. was rebuilding Ukraine's intelligence services from scratch because, the former ones was partnered with, well, they were partnered with Russia, so they weren't reliable. And again, the attraction of controlling these intelligence services was to use them as an instrument against the Russians. So they've been doing this for over a decade, and it's just, I can't imagine them wanting to give up this massive control. I mean, they control much of the government, the military, the intelligence services, the media, the civil society through all these NGOs.